going to talk about circles. We're going to write an equation of a circle given information about it. We're going to graph a circle given an equation. We're going to take a graph and write the equation from a graph. We're going to do a lot of different things between an equation of a circle and the circle itself. So the first thing we have to understand is, what does the equation of a circle look like? So the standard form of an equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. R equals the radius, not r squared. And the center is hk. I'll pause while you finish copying that down. The reason I wrote not r squared here is because way too often people see an equation of a circle and they see this number out here, whatever that number is, and they say, well, that's the radius. And I'm trying to impress upon you that that is not the radius. The radius is the square root of that number, because that number represents the radius squared. Okay, so if that number was 16, then the radius would be what? 4. If that number was 100, then the radius would be 10. If that number was 50, then the radius would be louder? Somewhere between 5 and 6? No? Keep thinking, though. What would it be? Somewhere between 7 and 8, right? Square root of 49 is 7, right? And so 50 would be a little bigger than 7. What I was hoping you'd say is, if this number was 50, then r would be the square root of 50. Okay? If that number that I've circled out there, that r squared was 50, then the radius would be the square root of 50. Which, if you were thinking that's 5 square root of 2, and that's why it's somewhere between 5 and 6, then that would be good thinking, because it is 5 square root of 2, but if you're thinking anything else, you probably just was confusing yourself. Okay? Square root of 50 is a little more than 7. All right? Any questions on what the equation looks like? This is the center. HK is the center. But notice in the equation it says minus h and minus k. So that means the center will always be the opposite sign of the equation. Okay? So if this said x plus 2, then that would mean h is a negative 2. Because x minus a negative 2 is the same as x plus 2, right? And the same thing over here with the y. Okay, so if that is a plus sign in there, then h would be a negative. If that's a minus sign in there, then h is a positive. It's always going to be the opposite sign. Okay, example. Here we have an equation. We want to graph this circle. We have an equation here. We want to graph the circle. So first thing I have to do is identify the radius and the center. Identify the radius and the center. Let's pause, let you think about that for a minute.
0?
The center will have two coordinates, an x and a y. What do you think it is now?
0, 0.
0, 0. I would agree with that. And we didn't record it, but we decided the radius is the square root of that number right there. And that is correct. Why is it 0, 0? Well, standard form looks like this. Oops, that's a lot. standard form looks like that, and all we have is x squared plus y squared equals 20. And so we're saying, what are we subtracting from x to get x? 0. What are we subtracting from y to get y? 0. So the center is 0, 0. In other words, it's at the origin. So here's my center, and my circle then is going to have a radius of 4.5. Excuse me. So it looks a little bit something like this. I want a little big. So it looks a little bit like that.
Since we don't have a smart board, how would we do this in homework?
Well,
Would we
if
have
I
to
was
make
to
a
graph
perfect
this,
circle? Would it-
glad you said
Oh,
that.
smart.
I would take a ruler, draw my axis. I would go over 5, up 5, left 5, down 5, and this is really hard on the board, but and it's a little easier on paper, but anyway, I would sketch.
Does it have to be perfect?
It can't be perfect if you're sketching it.
It's all one minute? I did painting class yesterday, so I bet I'm gonna be pro at that.
My worst part of this is the fact that I made these wider than I made those.
I'd say, okay.
These marks on this side are wider than those marks, so
Good enough.
they kind of match up. But anyway, that's what I would do and do
So
the
it
best
doesn't
I
have to
can
be
there to sketch that
perfect.
in. Okay? All right. Here we have another equation. What's the radius and what's my center? Someone other than Bailey. So Jacob, what's the radius? 3. Morgan, what's my center? So you're saying the radius was the square root of 9, which is 3. Okay. Someone other than Jacob and Bailey. Aaliyah? 0, 3? 0, negative 3? What is it? 0, 3 or 0, negative 3? Negative 3, because this is a plus sign, and so this is always going to be the opposite of that. Okay? It's always going to be the opposite of whatever the sign is inside the parentheses. And when we get into other forms of the equations, not circles, but parabolas and absolute values and hyperbolas and ellipse and all the other different things we could graph, I can't remember a single time when it's inside parentheses like that we don't use the opposite sign of what was in the parentheses. Okay? I don't know, well, I know why that works out, but it's a little harder to explain why it works out. But it is true that everything is always going to be an opposite sign of whatever's inside. Okay? So we found the radius, we found the center. I wanted to graph this, use my ruler and draw a straight line. The radius, my center is 0, negative 3, so down 3. Has a radius of 3, so there's going to be a point on the circle there, and there, and there, and there. And so do the best you can to draw in your circle. questions on graphing that equation? Okay. Here we have the center and the radius, and they want you to write an equation. Question, Jacob?
I was gonna say the answer.
Okay, let's let someone else, okay? I'd like someone new that hasn't helped me yet. Jacob, you want to tell us the standard form of the equation we're looking at?
X plus,
No, standard form. Just give me the standard form. There's no plus in there. X minus what?
H
H?
squared plus Y minus A squared equals radius squared.
Thank you. That's correct. So that's our model we're using. Go ahead, Easton.
X minus 2 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 16.
Okay, so you're saying I'm putting a 2 in here, a negative 3 in here, and a 4 in there, right?
16.
And so you're getting x minus 2 squared plus y minus a negative 3 squared equals 4 squared. And I know I'm going slow here. And it's not what he said. He made this change automatically, minus a negative. He called it plus 3 squared. And he called this 16 because he already squared it. But just to make sure everybody understood where you got those numbers, I wanted to plug them in directly
Yeah, I get it.
here and here and here. Okay? Any questions on how Easton got that answer? If they ask for the equation, that's all they're asking for. And if they give you the radius and the center, it's pretty straightforward, simple stuff, isn't it? Unfortunately, life isn't always that way. Ready?
Does it get
Going
harder?
backwards?
Did you get harder?
Mm,
They give us one like this. Number 38 out of the book said, excuse me. It says, write an equation of the circle given that A and B are endpoints of the diameter. A and B are endpoints of the diameter of the circle. Okay? A and B are endpoints of the diameter of the circle. What does that mean, it's the diameter of the circle?
Means it's this.
Go ahead.
All the way around the circle.
That sounds like the circumference
Okay,
of the
so
circle.
it's how wide the circle is.
How wide the circle is. So what's special about diameter, not just any chord?
Because it can show you the radius.
What's that?
Crosses the center.
Crosses the center.
And if you turn it like
So the diameter will pass right through the center, right? Creating how many radii, Bailey? 2 radii. And so if I graph this, this is absolutely not to scale. But let's just say I drew this picture and I pretended that this was my graph. I know it's absolutely not to scale because my y value is 3 here and negative 7 over here. And so if I drew this horizontal line through there, and it sure doesn't look like I have a 10 unit drop, does it, between those two? So it's not to scale, but it's a picture to look at. And so when I look at that picture, it might help me to see what I need to find. How do I write the equation of a circle? What do I need to have to write the equation of a circle? A radius. So I need to find what? What's the radius represent?
half
Half the
the diameter.
diameter. So you're saying I could find this distance and divide it in half to get the radius. Is that what you're saying?
So can't you just find the difference in between negative 2 and 6?
What's the Let's say that again.
Like the difference between negative 2 and 6, so that would be
8.
8.
careful though, because my picture's not drawn well, and so we also have to consider our y's in there, right? I agree, if this is a horizontal line, I could just look at my x's and say, well, it's 8 units apart, halfway in between is 4. But it's not a horizontal line, it's a diagonal line. It's not at all up to scale, so you have to be careful. But I like your thinking, that's good.
So do we have to bring
Would
the-
you say that a little louder, what you were whispering about to me?
Oh, the midpoint formula?
Yeah, he was asking me, what is the midpoint formula? Why would we need the midpoint formula?
Because you could find the midpoint, and then from there you can find just the radius.
What would the midpoint represent?
The radius.
No? Isn't this the midpoint?
Midpoint of.
Represents the what?
Oh, the center.
The center. So I need to have that anyway, don't I? Well, lucky for you, I have the midpoint formula right here. Yeah. Lucky for you. Midpoint formula.
We must.
Says add up the x's and divide by 2, add up the y's and divide by 2. In other words, find the average of the x's and the average of the y's. And we actually already did that with the x's, didn't we? We said this was -2. No, we didn't quite do it. We found the length of it, not the plus 6 over 2. And the other one's going to be 3 plus -7 over 2. You agree that this is 4? 4 divided 2 is 2?
Yeah.
And this is -4 divided 2 is -2. So my center is 2, -2. Alex. Alex, join us.
What?
Join us. We'll put our hat and coat in the locker if we can follow on.
It's not that, I'm just actually tired.
Yep, so am I. Okay. The next thing we have to do is find the distance from here to here or here to there. Either one of these would be r, the radius. We have to find the distance. And there's actually 2 ways of doing that. One is I could use the distance formula, remember that?
Yeah.
Another way is to actually use this area, or the formula for the equation of a circle. Okay? If I use this one, I already know the center is 2, -2. And what I need is an xy value. I need one point. Xy represents a point on the circle. So if I go back up here, do I have any points on the circle?
You got 3.
I only have 2
On the circle.
on the circle.
Not in the circle.
2 points on the circle, and I only need 1. Which one do I use?
2 and 3.
-2 and 3. Okay. So where x was, I'm going to put a -2. Where y was, I'm going to put a 3. And so r squared is going to equal -4 squared plus 5 squared. So that's 16 plus 25. Make sure you do that correctly in your calculator. Many of your calculators now know the difference between this and this. The one on the left gives me -16, the one on the right gives me a +16. They're not the same. The one on the left is saying the opposite of 4 squared. The one on the right is saying a -4 squared. And so this is 41. So r squared is 41. So r would be what? Square root of 41. But guess what? I want the equation of the circle, which means I don't really need r. I really need r squared. Remember, the motto is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Right? And what is r squared? Louder? 41. And what was my center? Was it 2, negative 2, or negative 2, 2?
No, it was 2,
Two, negative 2.
Yeah, it was 2, negative 2 right here. And so we have to plug that in. And so what goes in the first parentheses? I need a sign.
Negative 2.
Minus 2. What goes in the second one?
Plus
2. So this is the equation of my circle. That had the diameter with endpoints negative 2, 3, and 6, negative 7. Okay? Anybody not done with that? Question, Caleb?
No.
So today we're doing 1 through 37 odds. This quiz is over here now.
What?
37 hours.
No,
But you want Martin to pass. You don't want him next year.
that's true.
Want me to pass. You're gonna have
What?
next year.